Hello and welcome. My name is Brian Kaplan. I'm editor of The Banker, and we're just coming up to the time of the year in the Banker calendar where we publish our top 1,000 World Bank rankings. We've been doing this for over 40 years now. It's become very much an industry standard, and it's of course attracted increasing interest since the onset of the financial crisis and the aftermath of the financial crisis, when everybody around the world was absolutely interested in what was happening in the banking sector and the data that we've managed to collect for the banking sector. So I'm here with Guillaume Hingle, who's the research editor of the Top 1000 data set. And I know, Guillaume, that this year you've been collecting much more data than previous years. And you and your team have managed to collect a lot of data on the banks that we've never had before. So perhaps you could give us a little bit of an idea for the new kind of data that we can expect to see, both published in the magazine when it comes out in July, but also, more critically, they'll be available in the online product, the Banker database.
The Top 1000 used to focus on collecting the data for the Top 1000 before, so this year what we've tried to do is to cover more data points in order for the subscribers to the Banker database to access more disaggregated information on where banks make their profit, but also to landscape their balance sheet, so know which type of customers they lend to, but know what type of assets they got on their balance sheet, but also what type of liability they've got. So before, for each bank, we had an average of about 15 data points. Now for each bank, I think the average is around 65 data points.
Okay, this is very impressive. I mean, you know, as long as I've been editor of The Banker, we've been saying we'd like to have some of this information, particularly information about, you know, assets and sources of income and so forth. And it's always been very difficult to get, you know. So how is it we're managing to produce this data now? Are you able to kind of mine down into the annual reports, you know, more thoroughly than ever before, or the banks are kind of being a bit more open about what they give us?
Well, we work in two ways. We work firstly through an online survey, so we receive data from the bank, then we quality control it, and then we introduce it into the database. But at the same time, our research team analyzes the annual reports from banks we haven't heard from, and we also try to increase our coverage in emerging markets, but also increase our coverage of foreign-owned subsidiaries of Western banks.
Okay, that's great. Now, obviously, one of the things that happened in the financial crisis was that some of the world's leading banks, particularly in Western Europe and North America, took huge hits, and they made just these enormous financial losses. But Neil, we're on, you know, a couple of years now from the worst of the crisis. There's been some recovery. Are we getting to a stage now where banks' profits are getting back to the levels that we saw in 2007 before the financial crisis hit?
We're just about 5% below the 2007 profit levels of the Top 1000.
That's on an aggregate basis?
On an aggregate basis, exactly. However, these income do not come from the same regions now. The profit share of China, for example, in 2007 was only 10% of the total aggregate figure. This year it's about 20%. What we can also see is that the regions such as Eastern Europe or Latin America, there's very large lending growth, this deposit base is still growing, so they still manage to generate quite large profits, and we'll dig further into that.
Because it's interesting. I mean, we've been seeing, you know, the shift to the emerging markets over a long period of time. Again, you know, I mean, as long as I've been editor of The Banker, you know, we've seen a gradual movement. We've seen the banks from the BRIC countries coming up in the ranking. But, you know, glancing at the data, again, before we've actually finalised it, to me the impression is that it's a very much more significant move this year. You know, we really are seeing, you know, that it's China, Asia, Latin America, you know, Eastern Europe, where the growth is and the profits are, you know, and we're almost seeing a bipolar world now. And some of the Western European banks, you know, we've heard chief executives talk about, well, they'll be making single-digit returns on equity, whereas we're seeing, you know, still making 20% plus in Asia. Is that a fair assessment of where we are now?
I think it's a fair assessment. If you look at the aggregate asset growth of different regions, the only negative asset growth this year was Europe, was minus 0.5 in assets. So I think the context in Europe is also much more bearish. If you look at the rising interest rates, the deposit base not growing.
Yeah, okay, it's certainly a significant move. So I think, you know, we'll look forward now to seeing the full set of data for the Top 1000 when it comes out in July. On the database itself, the Banker database, you have many more banks with their figures there and a much wider set of data. But clearly, I think that we can say that we're going to have a more thorough investigation of the banking sector in this respect than we've ever had before. Now, if you want more information about how to get hold of your copy of the July issue, or if you want to subscribe to the database, please go to the website, thebanker.com/top1000.